Hi, this is Joe Rabil from Rabil Stock Research with your Daily 5. As many of you know, I'm a bottom-up technical analyst, and I look at thousands of charts on a regular basis to develop a feel for the market. However, I got a question about looking at sectors and industry groups to find ideas. So I thought I would show how I'd go about starting with the general market, working my way down until I got to the stocks. So this is a slightly different approach than I typically would use, but I like to use it in conjunction with looking at thousands and thousands of charts. So I'm going to focus on tech and semis today. So let's go ahead and get into the charts today. So I'm going to start with the Nasdaq. I'm then going to go down to the XLK for the tech sector. Then we're going to look at the semiconductor. I'm going to use the SMH for that. And then I've got a couple of semiconductor stocks that are worth noting. So let's just start with the Nasdaq and show at least what I see is going on. And I think there are some similarities to what's happening in the S&P as well. I think for both indexes, this last peak shown here on a daily chart is really important. And in this case, I think we're looking at a situation where we have this declining 18-month that's going to provide some resistance up there at this prior high. So we could actually turn this back up and still have some issues back up here at the next resistance zone, which shows up a little bit better on a weekly chart or on a monthly. But there could be room for a trading move, because if you think of what has taken place, we basically had a declining 18-week until this year, and now we're getting our first test, and it looks like a successful test of a rising 18-week. Now, the MACD, which was trending lower, diverged off this low and then actually made another higher bottom here, and then again made another higher bottom here, and it's attempting to cross above the zero line. So we've got some slight signs of improvement in MACD. We don't really see the improvement on an ADX basis. Now, that goes back to and basically confirms what I'm talking about in terms of the bigger picture. If I'm going to take a trade in this, just looking at the Nasdaq, I really don't want to look at a long-term trade right now. We have this declining line. If I want to play this, I want to play this off the weekly and the daily and look for a trading play, because we could get through the 18-month, but we're probably not going to start a trend with a declining 18-month. Also, you can see how the MACD has worked off the overbought condition, but it's still down here. It's going to take a little bit of time to get the momentum to shift on this time frame. So again, I'd be more inclined to look for some type of a trading move. So that's kind of my starting point. Now, look at the relative strength here. I'm going to zero in on this for a second. So if you notice on this last pullback, you see how the relative strength actually continued to go to new highs. So I like the look of that. That tells me that we're starting to see a little bit of outperformance coming from this area, and we have broken the downtrend line, which had been in place for over a year. So some things here starting to pique my interest a little bit, and especially from a trading standpoint, I like the idea that we're getting our first successful test and hold of the 18-week line. So let's go and look at the XLK. Now, if we look at what's going on here, we have the same strength, and in fact, to a more significant degree. Look at the strength on a relative basis. You see what's going on here? This last pullback, actually, even though the price pulled back, the relative strength line continued to climb higher. So I love to see that when I'm looking at an individual sector. Secondly, we had this big overbought condition at the beginning of 2022, and we have worked off a significant amount of that, but we're not showing the same kind of deterioration that we are in the Nasdaq composite. This is actually cupping around above the zero line. So some signs of improvement there. The other thing is that with any more strength here, we're going to be getting our way through the 18-month line. Now, that line is still declining. So again, I'm more inclined to be focused on a trading move, and a trading move for me would be focusing on a weekly and a daily chart. So the weekly is the trend time frame, and that's where we're getting a pullback to a rising moving average for the first time. That's successful. So if you notice what happened here, we had a nice move to the upside and we started to pull back, but instead of this holding, it failed at it. And then we tried to push above it again, failed at it again. Now, this is the first time really since this decline started in the beginning of 2022 that we have a successful test of the 18-week. Now, I mean, it's not really in this strong position to start a trending move because this line is declining. So I'm going to focus on playing the weekly chart using the daily to manage the risk. And if you notice what happened on the daily chart, we actually had a trend line break. And that trend line break is pretty significant for anyone who's taken my course or has followed my, is a subscriber, knows that we had this situation where we had a low ADX condition, a low ADX condition and a MACD crossing the zero line or holding the zero line. And when that happens, I'm looking to play the trend line break as kind of like a buy signal. And so this one is showing a little bit more strength on a MACD basis. It's showing a little bit better DI strength. So, I mean, these are all really positive situation if I want to look for a trading move. Now, we know that the Fed is coming out tomorrow, right? I mean, there's going to be some volatility. So when I go into the individual stocks, I'm going to show you how I would look to be a little bit more careful maybe and just have a slightly different trade and money management philosophy. But let's look at the SMH first. So now we're going to the individual industry group. We started with the market, the general market using a Nasdaq. Then we went to the sector looking at the XLK in technology. And now a subsector or an industry group inside of XLK would be the semis. The semis have been probably one of the strongest industry groups. Look at the relative strength line here. It's even stronger than the XLK. So Nasdaq is improving on a relative basis. The XLK is showing even more strength inside of the Nasdaq. And then the SMH is showing even more strength than the XLK is. So those are the kinds of things we want to be seeing, I think, in the types of patterns we're trying to find, especially if we're starting from a top down. Now, what I'm trying to find are patterns that still have risk reward. I don't necessarily want to buy something that's has been moving up and up and away. If I get something that extended, to me, I'm chasing. All right, I want to find something that's new and emerging. And we broke the downtrend line here, and then we came back through here. This is a 1, 2, 3, and now we're making another higher bottom. Lots of confirmation, more strength. Look at how the ADX is actually above 30 here, and the MACD is clearly above this the zero line. And then we just had another pause pullback in the form of a pinch play. Same type of trigger here. You see how this break of the trend line, this was a zero line reversal with low ADX. Red never got above green throughout this whole process and stayed below 25. I mean, these are all really bullish scenarios. Now, let's go down to an individual stock and look at this LRCX. And I wanted to find something that is showing relative performance. It's right around a 18-month line. It's got the zero line reversal developing on the monthly, and it's got, the same signs on a MACD basis with this pinch play to a pullback to a rising ADX. It's got a little bit more strength than the general market and the sector. Very similar to the SMH in terms of the way this is developed. And we have the same trend line break, zero line reversal with low ADX. Same pattern, generally speaking. Now, the way I would recommend, what I suggest you do in something like this is that you want to use this low as your stop. And that's going to keep the size of the position down because you want to risk whatever 1% of your account or whatever it is. You got to use a pretty strict money management philosophy in all your trading. If I take the trade here and I use this as my stop, by default, it's going to make it a smaller trade because we got a wider stop. The second thing that this is going to do, well, there's another thing that this is going to do, and that's going to give, with the Fed noise, a lot of times on Wednesdays when we get the Fed making a decision, we get a lot of noise. So it's going to allow you to give this a little bit more breathing room with the noise that's coming, which I expect there's going to be some noise. Now, it could be very adverse and negative, and it could cause the market to drop and put pressure on this, and that's why you only risk 1% of equity per trade to the stop. That's how I would look at it. Now, the other reason why this is so valuable here is that if it breaks that, it's also going to break the weekly. Then it's just a single trade. You take one entry and you have an opportunity to see if this wants to work. Let's look at one more here. Monolithic power is a little bit different. It's actually showing a significantly more strength when you look at the MACD and the ADX. It's got a flat 18-month in place. It didn't even reach the zero line here. And we haven't, but the difference here is it hasn't triggered. It needs to get through this trend line because we have a low ADX, a zero line reversal kind of developing with low ADX. So we need a trigger. It needs to get through. This has actually been stronger than the semis, but it hasn't triggered in the short term. In the short term, it's actually been underperforming a little bit. But look at the strength on a relative basis. So these are the types of things I think I'd be looking at if I'm starting from a high up, starting from a general market and working my way down. So I hope you enjoyed this segment. You can contact me through LinkedIn, Twitter, or find my research on rabilstockresearch.com. In addition, if you'd like to learn more about trend, MACD, and ADX in multiple timeframes, I have a trend and momentum trading course, which can be found at rabilstockresearch.com/services. So it delves into this subject pretty in-depthly. Have a great trading day, and I will see you next time.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.